Verity, Kane, Aaron, and Odell navigated through the collapsing sections of the system, with the surrounding code becoming increasingly chaotic. The virtual world trembled like a crumbling building, its walls undulating. Flickering lights and lost data fragments surrounded them. As Verity glanced around, she sensed that something was amiss. The boundary between reality and the virtual world had become increasingly blurred. Unfamiliar images caught her eye, strange, seemingly abandoned digital structures. Some structures appeared to be trapped between the real and the virtual, intensifying her vigilance. Aaron looked around anxiously. "This place is very different from the areas we've passed through," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's as if it's gained consciousness." Kane noticed that the path ahead suddenly opened and turned quickly. "Verity, we need to hurry. We must get out before the system restabilizes," he said. As Verity ran behind Kane, a conflict began in her mind. The real world had been a place she had longed for. Yet, this world, despite being virtual, had become a paradise they had created. Even though it was digital, everything here had brought them peace and happiness. "Kane, what if we leave and the real world is in worse shape than we imagined?" she said. Kane hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "The real world, though it may be in poor condition, is still the truth, Verity. We must choose reality," he said. Odell approached them and spoke with determination. "Verity, Kane is right. This world under the cult's control offers no real freedom. Staying here only means enslavement," he said. Verity took a deep breath. "All right, you're right," she said. But her uncertainty was not entirely gone. She had not known the real world's condition for a long time, and leaving the comfort of this place was difficult. As the team struggled with indecision and anxiety, the data layers around them continued to degrade. Data streams on the walls flickered, and codes undulated and broke apart. However, something caught one of their attentions. Aaron suddenly stopped and stared at a vacant spot. Her eyes were fixed on a structure unlike anything she had seen before. "Look at that," she said, her voice filled with astonishment. The group turned towards where she was pointing. There stood a gateway connecting the virtual world to the real one. The gateway had a pulsing energy, and around it, both digital and organic elements seemed to coexist. It appeared to be a bridge from the virtual world to the real world. Odell squinted in amazement. "This gateway. It could lead to the real world," he said. "But since it looks like this, the cult might not control it. This could be the exit we've been searching for." Verity approached the gateway and touched the energy fluctuations around it with her hands. She felt an instant coldness, but also a calling within. With the real world so close, she didn't want to pull back. Kane asked cautiously, "What if it's a trap? What if the cult found a way to trap us here completely?" he said. Odell shook his head. "I don't know. But we're out of options. This gateway could either be our freedom or our doom," he said. Aaron also approached the gateway, placing her hands gently on its edges. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. "I think we should take this route. No matter how tough the real world is, we can change it," she said. Verity nodded resolutely. "All right," she said. "We're taking the risk." As the team stepped into the gateway, energy waves began to envelop them. The first few steps were filled with a sense of both intoxicating freedom and deep uncertainty. The surrounding digital world started to fade, leaving behind a dark void. However, beyond this void, the real world might be waiting for them. Suddenly, a blinding light appeared. It surrounded them and compelled them to quicken their pace. The entire system was attempting to complete their transition. Just then, a figure emerged from the light. The figure was the leader of the cult. His digital form appeared detached from the real world, his eyes were empty, and his expression was filled with deep anger. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice echoing mechanically. Verity's heart raced. "This isn't possible. You're just a data construct," she exclaimed. The leader smiled coldly. "No matter what you choose, I will exist in both worlds. You can't escape," he said. Kane, with an instinctive move, lunged at the leader. "We're not letting you block the gateway," he shouted, but the leader's presence suddenly shattered, and Kane was thrown into the void. Odell quickly began analyzing the leader's digital form. "His presence is not purely virtual. He has established a physical connection. He could have an effect in the real world too," he said. Verity looked on in fear. "How do we stop him?" Is he powerful in both the digital and real worlds? She asked. Odell took a determined step forward. The only thing that will weaken him is collapsing both worlds. We need to destroy both this virtual world and the cult's physical connection, he said. Verity quickly moved away from the gateway and towards the leader's figure. Kane, Aaron, and Odell followed closely. They now had only one option: to risk everything to leave behind both the virtual world and the cult. As the leader looked at them with deep anger in his eyes, Verity and her team decided to fight against him. But this battle would not only be a digital clash, but also a breaking point in their minds and perceptions of reality. Before the gateway could transport them to the real world, they would face one last obstacle. It would be a struggle that tested all their courage and determination. Verity, Kane, Aaron, and Odell stood before the gateway, ready to face the final confrontation with the cult leader's digital avatar. Each felt the weight of this last move that would determine their fate in both the virtual and real worlds. As the cult leader approached them, the power of his digital form began to shake the surrounding virtual environment. Verity's mind was focused on a single question: how could they win this battle? The leader watched them with dark power. You dare challenge me without even understanding the rules of this world? Everything here is under my control, he said, his voice echoing and causing the digital walls around them to tremble. Kane, undeterred by the leader's words, charged forward. Your rule ends here, he shouted, eyes filled with determination and anger. He quickly drew his sword and swung it towards the leader, but when the blade touched the leader's form, the figure merely flickered and vanished like a shadow. Kane pulled back in astonishment. How is this possible? He exclaimed. The leader reappeared from the void, smiling at them. I am an illusion. It is enough for me to exist here to defeat you. There is no escape. Aaron ran to Kane's side. We can't truly hurt him. This isn't a hologram, it's a digital entity, she said. If we don't sever its connection to the real world, stopping it here is impossible. Verity suddenly had a realization. The main computer in the real world. If we destroy it, the cult leader will collapse in this world too, she said. Odell quickly began analyzing. The coordinates of the main computer are buried deep within the virtual reality, but we can access them while we're here. If we find the coordinates, we can use the gateway to return to the physical world and dismantle the system, he said. Verity took a deep breath. All right, then while we keep the leader occupied, you find the coordinates, Odell, she said. Kane and Aaron will help me distract him. Kane made another move to distract the leader and attacked his digital form again. Think you can defeat all of us, he shouted. Aaron supported Kane, searching for the leader's weak points. But with each attack, the leader seemed to grow stronger. Verity pushed her worries aside and joined the fight. Though the leader's form flickered with each attack, it always reformed. Meanwhile, Odell was searching for the coordinates deep within the system. His mind raced, analyzing various codes. Finally, he found a code sequence, and his eyes lit up. Got it. The location of the main computer. I've pinpointed it to an old facility in the real world, he said excitedly. We need to enter the gateway immediately. Verity, Kane, and Aaron briefly withdrew from the leader. Let's go towards the gateway. Verity shouted. The team rushed towards the gateway despite the leader's attacks. Just as they were about to reach it, the leader suddenly appeared in front of them. His eyes were now completely dark, and the surrounding energy waves seemed to be out of control. I will not allow you to do this, he said, his voice a dark, echoing tremor. Verity looked into the leader's eyes and spoke with determination. We will escape this world. We will not be your slaves, she said. The leader paused momentarily, a flicker of doubt appearing in his eyes. This brief moment was an opportunity for the team. Aaron quickly jumped at the leader, momentarily disrupting his digital form. Now, enter the gateway, she shouted. Verity and Kane plunged into the gateway, followed by Odell. Aaron narrowly avoided the leader's final attack and jumped into the gateway. As the gateway enveloped them, the leader's dark figure was left behind, and the digital world rapidly faded from view. When Verity opened her eyes, she found herself in a cold, dark room. They had returned to the real world. As she looked around, she felt that everything was different from before. Returning from the virtual world had a strange effect, as if their bodies had been immobile for a long time. But they had succeeded. They were back in the real world. Kane opened his eyes and took a deep breath. Did we do it? He asked, his voice tired but hopeful. Odell looked around. This place, it's the facility where the main computer was located, he said. We need to get inside immediately. If we dismantle the system, the cult leader will be gone forever. Erin struggled to stand up. Let's finish this, she said. The team quickly moved towards the area where the main computer was located. They reached an old, seemingly abandoned control room. Odell moved to the terminal and placed his hands on the keys. I just need to enter a few codes to dismantle the system. Be ready, he said. Verity, Kane, and Erin watched carefully. This was their toughest moment. When the system crashed, everything would end. Both the virtual world and the cult's control over reality would vanish. As Odell entered the final code, the lights on the terminal began to blink rapidly. The system started to collapse. The machines around them vibrated as the digital data layers within the main computer were disintegrating. Suddenly, the leader's face appeared on the screens in the room. You really dared to do this, he said, his voice now weak and muffled. This is just the beginning. Even in the real world, I will find you. Verity looked coldly at the leader's face. You have no place in our world anymore, she said. You will be gone forever. There was a loud explosion, and the main computer completely collapsed. All screens went dark, the machine stopped, and a silence fell. The leader's face had disappeared, never to return. Kane took a deep breath and looked up. Is it over? He asked. Verity looked around. It's over, she said, her voice calm but resolute. Erin, tired but hopeful, smiled. We're free now, she said. Odell moved away from the terminal and joined his friends. The real world is now ours. We managed to stop them, he said. Verity looked out the window of the room. The real world stretched out before them. They could now start anew. The cult was gone, but this world still had its own issues to face. Kane came to Verity's side. The real world has never looked so beautiful, he said, smiling. Verity took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, this world is ours, and we will do everything to protect it, she said. Days had passed since they had destroyed the system and eliminated the cult leader. Verity, Kane, Erin, and Odell were now in the real world, trying to rebuild a new order alongside people who were struggling to recover from the great devastation. However, thinking that everything would fall into place would be too optimistic. The real world had been corrupted, abandoned, and decayed under the cult's virtual reality system for years. Verity stood on a high hill early in the morning, gazing at the horizon. The city was filled with ruins of buildings and deteriorated infrastructure as far as the eye could see. The real world had never looked so cold and harsh. What do we do now? She asked herself. Hearing footsteps, she turned to see Kane approaching. His eyes were as tired as hers, but filled with determination. We need some rest, Verity, Kane said as he sat beside her. But I know resting is not your thing. Verity shook her head. This world is not the virtual paradise under the cult's control. Surviving here won't be easy, she said. I'm not sure people can recover. Most of them have already forgotten reality. Kane took a deep breath and looked at the horizon. You're right. Virtual reality was an escape for them. Now that they're back, they don't know how to adapt. But it's our job to help them get back on their feet, he said. What about the remnants of the cult? Verity asked anxiously. The system is down, but it's not over. If any of their followers are still here, it's just a matter of time before they regroup and strike again. Kane pondered for a moment. We need to unite what's left of us. We have to build new leadership and a new order. We can give people hope, Verity. But to do that, we need to find strength within ourselves first, he said. Meanwhile, Erin and Odell were working with the people trying to recover in the city center. Odell was trying to get damaged technologies up and running again, while Erin was organizing the people. Erin, distributing food to a group of young children, watched them carefully. For these children, the real world is a vast unknown, she said to Odell. They grew up in virtual reality. Now they'll have to learn how to survive here. Odell paused for a moment, then nodded. Most of the systems haven't returned to their old state. We're struggling to even provide electricity right now, but things will gradually improve. We can rebuild this world with technology. If we work together, we'll succeed, he said, his voice full of hope. But behind these hopeful talks, there was still fear, the possibility of the cult returning. When Kane returned to the city center, whispers from the dark alleys reached his ears. A group of people had secretly gathered and were discussing the cult's old teachings. Cain watched them, his eyes flashing with anger. Realizing that this threat was still alive, he knew they couldn't waste any more time. Cain found Verity and told her about the situation. "The remnants of the cult are here, Verity. They want to come back. They said this world would be ours. We defeated the leader, but these thoughts are still alive in their minds," he said, his voice filled with concern. Verity took a deep breath. "We have to stop them. We can't let these old shadows destroy our efforts to build a new world," she said. "But this time, we'll use a different strategy. We'll bring them out of the darkness." When Aaron and Odell learned of this situation, they decided to hold a deep meeting. They needed to reorganize the people, maintain power, and preserve order. However, they wanted to instill freedom and hope in everyone. They didn't want the old methods, which resembled the oppressive regime of the cult. That night, Verity lit a torch and went to the city square. The gathered crowd looked at her. Their eyes were filled with people who had just emerged from darkness. "We've gathered here today because it's time to build a new world," Verity said, her voice resolute. "The real world is now ours. The dark order of the cult has ended, but that means we need to rise again together. We will rebuild this world together. With all your help, we will bring back freedom and hope." The crowd watched her silently, but a spark of hope began to shine in their eyes. Cain, Aaron, and Odell stood behind Verity, supporting her. Verity raised the torch high. "This world is ours, and we will protect it. The shadow of the cult is now behind us. From now on, we will rely on each other and stand together," she said. One person from the crowd stepped forward and approached Verity. She was a young woman with concern in her eyes. "But what if the cult rises again? Are we truly strong enough to stop them?" she asked, her voice trembling. Verity approached the young woman and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We have everything we need to stop them," she said calmly. "But we'll do it together. This world belongs to all of us." The crowd slowly began to support Verity. People looked at her with hope, standing behind her. Verity's speech had become a harbinger of a new order. That night, the foundations of a new order were laid in the city. However, Cain, Aaron, and Odell remained vigilant. The remnants of the cult could reappear at any moment, and they would have to fight against them in this new world. But this time, they were not alone. In the struggle to rebuild the real world, everyone had united under Verity's leadership. Yet, a threat still lurked in the shadows. The cult had not been completely eradicated. They were waiting in the darkness. And one day, they would emerge again. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye, see you in the next story.